It all started as a seemingly ordinary night. My mum's been dating this guy for about a year now, and even though I've only been around him a few times, nothing ever seemed off until this night. My mum had to stay in the hospital for 24 hours due to an emergency, so I decided to stay at her boyfriend's place to be closer to her. I'm 20 and this was my first time alone with him. He seemed like a regular guy. They lived together out of town, so I thought, why not? I can make it through one night. On the way back to his place, he suggested we stop to grab some beer. He knew I drink occasionally and it felt harmless at the time. Just a casual drink, something to pass the time while I waited for my mum to get better. We sat outside, him smoking weed and me sipping my beer. The conversation was light, mostly small talk, nothing that raised any red flags at first. He kept trying to pass me the joint, and I had to turn him down a couple of times, reminding him I don't smoke. He shrugged it off, went inside, and I followed shortly after. When I stepped back into the house, I noticed something was different. Music was playing, but not just any music. It was slow, sexy R&B. I felt a strange vibe creeping in. It was subtle, but enough to put me on edge. He was still talking, and I tried to focus on the conversation. But then he dropped a comment that made me freeze. He looked at me and said, "I've got to ask you something. Where did you get all that ass?" I laughed awkwardly, trying to shake off the weirdness. "Shut up," I said, trying to keep things light. But inside I was already panicking. The atmosphere had shifted in a way I couldn't quite articulate. We kept talking, but his questions got more pointed, more personal. He started asking about strip clubs in the area. I'd been looking for a job, and somehow he twisted the conversation to fit his narrative. "Have you ever danced before?" he asked, eyes lingering a little too long. The music playing in the background started to make sense. The slow beat, the suggestive lyrics, it all clicked. Then he crossed a line that I couldn't ignore. "You should get naked and dance for me," he said, his voice low, almost like he was testing the waters, seeing how far he could push. My heart raced. I said, "Hell no, WTF," but my voice wavered. It's hard for me to be firm in situations like this. Past experiences, rape, abuse, have left me with a reflex to shrink, to lose my voice when I need it most. But I was clear, even if my voice shook. "You're supposed to be my stepdad, that's weird." "I'm 20, I said, hoping he'd back off. But he didn't. He just kept going, kept pushing. "I just want to see you naked, so I can see what your mother looked like at your age," he said, as if that made it okay. I kept saying no, over and over, throwing out every excuse I could think of. I even started talking about my boyfriend, hoping to redirect the conversation. But he didn't take the hint. He asked, "Have you ever been with an older man?" And then, "So you're not going to get naked and dance?" I was so uncomfortable, but he kept pushing. I could feel my skin crawling, my mind racing through every worst-case scenario. What if I said yes? What if I gave in? I knew what would happen next, and it scared me to my core. I felt trapped, stuck in a house with a man who wouldn't take no for an answer. Finally, maybe sensing my growing fear, he backtracked, saying he was kidding, that it was all just a joke. But it wasn't. I knew it wasn't. There was a desperation in his voice, a way he lingered on the questions that told me he was dead serious. He went to bed, and I was left alone, holding on to my pepper spray all night, unable to sleep. The house felt suffocating. Every creak, every noise made me jump. I replayed the conversation over and over, wondering how I'd missed the warning signs. I felt stupid for not leaving sooner, but I was scared. What if he tried something? What if he came into my room? I stayed awake until the sun came up, heart pounding, mind racing. The next morning, he came to me, apologizing, saying he'd gotten too high and wasn't thinking straight. "I'm not that type of person," he said, trying to brush it off. I nodded, said it was fine, but inside I was still reeling. I knew it wasn't just the weed. I knew he'd meant every word. When I finally told my mom the next day, I expected her to be angry, to confront him, to stand by me, but instead she got defensive, brushing it off as a joke, saying he had a dark sense of humor. She was more upset with me for making it a big deal than with him for crossing every line. He sent me a half-hearted apology text, and my mum told me to drop it, to stop overreacting. I felt sick. How could she not see it? How could she not understand that he wasn't joking, that he'd spent 30 minutes trying to get me to take my clothes off, pushing and pushing like it was some kind of game? I felt so unheard, so invalidated. It was like she was gaslighting me, telling me I was wrong to feel the way I did. I started to question myself, wondering if I should have just kept my mouth shut, if I'd overreacted, if I'd blown it out of proportion. But deep down, I knew I was right. I knew what I'd felt in that moment wasn't a joke. It was real and it was wrong. I don't know what would have happened if I'd given in, but I know it wouldn't have been good. My mom might never see it, and he might keep pretending it was all in good fun, but I can't forget it. I won't forget it. And no matter how much they try to downplay it, I know my feelings are valid. I know what happened wasn't okay. I'm left with this deep sense of betrayal, not just by him, but by my mom too. I feel lost, hurt, and disgusted. And most of all, I feel alone. Stuck between wanting to scream the truth and wondering if anyone would even listen. But no matter what, I'll keep holding on to my truth. Because I know what happened. And I know it wasn't just a joke.
I shall see you. Here,